Hello friends, this is Will Dodd with Georgia Youth Science and Technology Centers, and this is episode 2 of Prepping for the JunkBot Battle. Alright, so if you remember from episode 1, I ripped this DC motor and gearbox and wheels and axle out of a remote control car, and I have it hooked up to a cell phone power bank, and I got some buttons set up. It's a little wild looking. I'll break it down a little bit later to actually show you what's going on, but here's how it's working so far. If I turn on my battery, I can press these two buttons and get forward motion with my DC motors, and then I can press these two buttons and get backwards motion with my DC motors. So what I'm going to do now is go ahead and break down what we're looking at so that you can replicate some setup like this. The first component we're going to take a look at is the DC motor. So mine that I have here, I got a little flag on it so that we can see the direction of the spin, because we're going to send electricity through it two different ways to see if we can get it to go forward and backwards. Now if you don't know much about DC motors, Google it, because I don't have time in this video to tell you much about DC motors and how they work, things like that. But I will tell you, it does have something to do with the relationship between magnetism and electricity. Isn't that a 5th grade standard? Yeah, it is. So take a look at that. So I have here my DC motor with the flag on it. I have my power bank, and I have some alligator clips. If you don't have alligator clips, get some, because they're wildly useful. So my white alligator clip, it is hooked up to the positive terminal of my battery and my DC motor, because I'm running out of colors here. The yellow is hooked up to my negative terminal of both my battery and my DC motor. So what I'm going to do is turn on my power bank, and we're going to see which way the DC motor spins. And is that clockwise? I got to look at a clock. So apparently that is counterclockwise. Darn you digital clocks. So what I can do right now is I can switch the direction of the flow of electricity coming through the DC motor, and I should get my DC motor to change direction. So right now it's going counterclockwise. If I swap these alligator clips, I should be able to get it to go clockwise. I'm still getting messed up with that. So this is, which way is it going? Yeah, so that's counterclockwise. I'm going to get it to go clockwise. Feel free to make fun of me. So I'm going to switch these, which is going to switch the direction of the flow of electricity through the DC motor. So let's see what it does. Oh my gosh. Okay, I got my flag back on. I'm going to turn the power bank on, and we should see the flag turning clockwise. Boom. Alright, so that tells us that if we swap the flow of electricity through our DC motor, it is going to spin in the opposite direction. Man, I got to work on my clockwise, counterclockwise. So I know that I want the motor to go forward as well as backwards, and I want to achieve this by using buttons. Now, check out my button that I have. It's tiny. Can you see that? It came out of an Arduino kit. I've got a bunch of them, which is good because we're going to need a bunch of them. And I also have something called a breadboard. If you've never used a breadboard, I highly recommend that you get one. Now, I don't have time to tell you how these work, other than you can plug wires into these without having to solder them. And if you don't know anything about soldering, I'll just go ahead and tell you it's pretty much like hot gluing electronics, except rather than melting glue, you're melting metal. And it's a lot of fun. And you can burn yourself, so definitely be careful with that. So I'm going to go ahead and show you my experimentation with breadboarding and making my button control my DC motor. Alright, so I have my breadboard and I have my battery. So the first thing I'm going to do is hook up my battery to my breadboard. So my red is my positive terminal for my battery. I'm going to go ahead and hook it to my breadboard here, where the little plus sign is. And the green wire is my negative terminal for my battery, so I'm going to hook it up here where the negative is. So next, I know that I want to put one of these tiny buttons on my breadboard. So I'm going to go ahead and stick that in there. I'm going to put it right here. It really doesn't matter a whole lot where you put it, so feel free to put it wherever you want to. Alright, so we're just going to take a look quickly at how this button can be used to turn on and off my DC motor here. So I've got my drive motor for my robot. I've got my orange jumper cable representing my positive terminal on my DC motor and my blue jumper cable representing the negative terminal for my DC motor. So what I'm going to do is take the negative terminal of the DC motor and hook it to the negative terminal of the battery. And then I'm going to take the positive terminal of the DC motor and connect it to the terminal of this button right here. Now, if you don't know much about breadboards, each one of these columns on the breadboard is connected. So if I just plug in this jumper cable to the same column that this button terminal is in, it gets connected to that button's terminal without soldering. So it's really easy to do prototyping with a breadboard like this, with electronics. So what I need to do now is hook that other button terminal up, boop, with this jumper cable to the positive terminal of the battery. Alright, so I have that hooked up now. So what I should be able to do is turn on my power on my power bank. And I should be able to press this button and close the circuit and get some DC motor action. Yeah, that's working correctly. Alright, if I take my hand off the button, it stops my motor. So that's good, but that only allows me to go forward. Oh no. So unfortunately what I just showed you only allows your motor to move in one direction, which would probably be okay for a BattleBot. You might do okay with just a one-directional motor. However, I want mine to go forward and backwards. So I've got to figure out how to use those buttons to switch the direction of the electricity across the DC motor so that I can achieve forward motion and backward motion.